Hi guys, welcome. Lovely to see you all. It is early afternoon, our part of the world, but lovely to see you all. We're seeing some familiar faces. Hey Oliver, lovely to see you. And Galitha is a familiar face. Rianda is a familiar face. But then we see a lot of other new people, so really welcome. We're very happy that you are here. Just for the purpose of not going crazy on the call, we have actually put you all on mute. Hi, Tim, but you can't unmute yourself. Purely, it becomes a little bit of a circus and there's a lot of distractions. So that's our only bit of way to get some auditory control on the call. But I'm going to introduce you to my co-facilitators just now. And then please, the chat box is fully open. So right throughout the session, absolutely feel free to pop questions for us in the chat box, and we'll be answering throughout the session. We will have some dedicated sessions towards the end as well, but right throughout, if anything comes up, please do feel free to pop it in the chat box. Obviously, I'm Annemarie, so I think you've read about us. A lot of you know us. And then Marita de Toy is my co-facilitator, and we also have Alison on the call. A lot of you have been receiving emails from Alison. So we ask Alison just to be on the call to show her face so that you can see a little bit of the face behind the emails, but we've allowed her to just pop off after a little bit when we got started because we are busy with a product development, and we got to do testing and lots of prepare stuff. So she's going to continue with that while we go through the material. Okay, Alison, so thank you very much for showing your face. And then, as I said, Marita will be doing the chat box for us. Maybe just, it's always fun to know that we're sitting across the world and we're connecting with each other. Again, thank you to COVID and the pandemic. It has opened up the boundaries of the world for us. So I think that's a very positive thing. And I, for one, was very opinionated about online training and saying, oh, it's not going to work and we don't believe in it. Well, I am eating my own words because it does work. And it is really wonderful to see people from so many different places. So please pop in the chat box where you are from. It would be really, really nice just to know what parts of the world you are. And then Marita, maybe you can also help me to see. Marita is the detailed person on the call here, so that she can get an idea for us where are people from. So let us know.
We've got Aberdeen, UK.
Wonderful, Tim. Lovely that you are here.
Anna from the UK, Devon. Veronica from Surrey. Galicia from South Africa, Joburg. Oliver Heath in the UK. Tegan, South Africa. Marlene, Cape Town in South Africa. Rianda, a South African, but in Scotland. Roxanne from South Africa. Alice from Cape Town. Sarah from Stirling, Scotland. Bethany, Texas, USA, and Michigan, USA. Charis, I hope I say that right. I'm sure I'm not. Sorry, apologies. From Joburg in South Africa.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So yes, we definitely have people all over the world, and there's another Cape Town person. So we are based in South Africa. I'm based in Cape Town. Alison's based in Cape Town, and Marita's based in George. And as I said, it's lovely that we can really communicate with you across the world. Okay, wonderful. So we've been running these free webinars because obviously the whole idea is for us to share sensory intelligence with you. We've been around for a very long time. I started the business in 2000 in my head, 2002 part-time, and 2005 full-time. So we have really been around the block. Lots of new things, lots of development, and it's absolutely been our passion to share this particular concept with you. So the free events is really because I think a lot of people don't know what we are all about, and it's just a way to share some of the knowledge. Those of you who might have attended the first one, I think we did this one in December. There was a focus on mental health and well-being. Today's focus is more going to be around workplace productivity. And the reality is I've got so much content and information, I can keep you busy for a year. We've got an hour, so I promise to be short, to the point, and give you snippets of information to expand your insight, but also to give you some personal application to it, which I think is really, really important. So, and forgive me, this is the one thing I am still stuck with slides. Even though we are on Zoom and across the world, it does help if there's also an image related with that. So let's just use some multi-sensory learning here. So the focus today is around the workplace and how can sensory intelligence help from a workplace performance. And I know, Oliver, I have to single you out because I know Oliver is around workplace design. There's a lot of therapists, there's a lot of coaches. So it really fits into how do we consider sensory intelligence for so many variables in those of you improving the quality of life for your clients or the people that you are working with. Okay. So the content, let me just move my Zoom bar so that it's not in my face. So I'm just going to do 4 things quickly. I'll allow you a bit of an overview what is sensory intelligence all about so that you at least know the science, the neuro, the research behind that absolutely in a quick nutshell. And then hopefully all of you have done the sensory quiz, and some of you have actually done our full assessment to really understand how does your sensory wiring work, because that's where the magic comes in. Who are you? How are you wired? And what does that mean for you in your day-to-day workspace? And then we are going to talk about workspace and trying to match you with what is your best workspace and how do we use sensory intelligence to do that. Everything that we do is really based around the environment that we are in. And we'll go through that. And the 4th one is I'm going to tap into sensory ergonomics for you. And sensory ergonomics is really simple yet very practical and effective ways to make sure that we actually manage the energy and the focus and the time that we have on a day-to-day basis. So those are the 4 things that we're going to work through. I'm sure you will agree with me, the world of work has really changed, and obviously COVID has really done that, and I think accelerated so many developments. This is not new for all of you here. We know that traditional office space has changed. Before the pandemic, only 20% of people were working remotely, but then obviously with the pandemic, everyone had to go to home working, and a lot of organizations and people had to adapt across the world. How do we really work from home? Because lockdown just enforced that on us. And then going back to remote working, after COVID, October 2020 data is showing, and Marita will share some links for you in the chat box if you want to go look at that. 70% of people were then working remotely at 2022. So there was a 50% increase in people actually going into remote working spaces. And now we're sitting with hybrid. Should I be at the office? Should I be at home, remote? So I think it's become this jungle of differences, and a lot of people are unsure. Where should I be working? Where am I more productive? And obviously it has created, I think, a lot of problems. It has risen a lot new challenges for people in their own workplaces, for managers, for leaders, and for organizations, obviously. And maybe work with me here. Tell me, what is the one thing that you have struggled with personally, or from an organizational point of view, you have been confronted with the problems or the challenges that you are seeing following this new world of work. So it would be really, really interesting to see what you guys have been experiencing. If you want to share that in the chat box.
Burnout. Burnout.
Yeah, burnout. So true. People are working
lack of
longer
resources.
periods of time, lack of resources. Marita, go.
I'll go as they come in.
Yeah, burnout is, we are also talking a lot about digital fatigue. I think digital fatigue is something that's become very prominent.
There's anxiety for people returning to offices, employees feeling overwhelmed with workload, can't work on screens, lack of communication and connectivity with my team, balancing work and family for those with children at home, trying not to do housework during working hours, lost connectivity at a physical level, social isolation, can't manage noise back in office when they return to work, so true, feeling less connected with your team.
Awesome. Thank you. That's the kind of stuff that we definitely have been seeing as well. Digital fatigue, burnout, and people are working longer hours. They're really stuck behind their systems and their computers for much longer. So the amount of digital fatigue, anxiety, and burnout that we are seeing has definitely been increasing. Marita?
I have to share this one. Positive, less office drama. Bethany? Fully agree.
Absolutely, less office drama for sure. Another one thing that obviously have popped up here is people's level of isolation. Our worlds have definitely shrunk. And we've been having some interesting conversations where people feel even the quality of their relationships have shifted. They now are socializing in smaller groups, less frequent, but maybe let's look at the positive. It might have intensified the quality of the relationships that they've been having, but for sure, sensory isolation. And then we are finding that, I think it was it Nakulu that said, can't manage when you go back to work, you're struggling. No, it was C.A. Thomas, manage the noise back when you're back in the office, because I think that is what has also happened with our world's becoming so small. The brain hasn't been stimulated with so much information, then literally moving back into those office shared spaces created a lot more difficulty for people to adapt to that again. Marita, there's a few more.
There are a few more. Rianda said that's on a positive. I feel renewed and free from home working. Communication issues, use of email, WhatsApp versus having real conversations. Opportunity gained in coaching at a broader global level. So that's a positive again. Galicia, isolation and low organizing skill. Rianda says, I'm more productive and unfortunately do not miss that group cohesion in an office. Veronica, enjoy being able to play my music when not online. Can't do that in the office. Tegan, more flexibility. Remote working works well and I get more done at home. The issue of load shedding in South Africa, a problem.
Yeah, Veronica, let's not go there. The one thing that I also like, Tegan, is that flexibility. I think that's really, really important. Nakula also, yes, as I said, it's opened up boundaries for us, so we can work across the world so much easier now. Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, guys. It also just helps that, we are experiencing similar results or similar issues. Where we think the focus should be, definitely for us, I think it's a matter of flexibility. And I'm not talking from an organizational point of view. I think organizations is going to do well with hybrid working if they can be flexible. And they're not a one-size-fits-all approach. What works for one person does not necessarily work for another person. And environments and workspaces are crucial and very, very important. We need to consider individual differences. The research that I've been doing, my PhD, was based in a call center. Heaven knows why I did it, because it was the most horrendous, for those of you involved in that industry, a horrendous type of a space for people to work at, saying that certain people with low thresholds can't really work in a call center where other people do that really, really well. So I think we always have to consider environments matter, space matter, and it is really an individual approach per person and not using a one-size-fits-all approach. And then workspace design, Olatha, very happy that you are here. Workplace design, I think, has always been important, but really looking at the fact that if we design spaces for people and it suits their particular need, and we go through, a very general but a good high-level benchmarking process, then we can actually make people work better, be healthier, and actually keep them longer from a retention point of view. So workspace design is important, not just for the office, but also for setting up home spaces. And then obviously culture and leadership. I mean, that goes, I kind of say without saying, but if leadership and culture can't really embrace the flexibility and really driving hybrid working really well, then they're not going to necessarily, I think, tick all the boxes in the process. So enough of that, just so that we all are contextually on the same page there and we're singing from the same hymn sheet. Let's just talk, what is sensory intelligence? For some of you on the call, this might be repetition, but repetition is always good. That's how the brain learns. So obviously we work with the senses, knowing your senses and how your environment plays a role in what it does to your brain, and then ultimately your attention, emotion, and behavior. So we do have 7 senses. We don't just have 5, and I'll elaborate on that pretty soon. And intelligence here is the art of knowing. It's not the art of scoring and you're not good enough. So when we talk about sensory intelligence, is not your intelligence, is it good enough? You need to increase your intelligence. No, it's not like an IQ score and an EQ score. It's really the fact that you are who you are. Do you understand how your brain responds through your senses to your environment? And what does it mean for you from a day-to-day perspective. So that's really, really important for us. So we are training and a development platform, and we focus on the model, the theory, the research, and the application of sensory processing. So if you wanted to learn more about this field, go Google Scholar and go sensory processing. It's a huge, wide area of learning about human behavior and human performance, obviously. And we do that through assessment, workshops, and coaching, right across globally as well, thanks to COVID from that point of view. And really the focus that we have is, how does your brain interact with your environment? And we're talking external environment. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? Those are the things that we consider. The value, firstly, if by being more sensory intelligent, you are going to improve your health and well-being. And I'm very proud to say that between me, Marita, and Alison, we live our sensory intelligence on a day-to-day basis. Everything that we do personally and professionally is really based on this insight, and we use it to our best benefit. Sometimes we do get it wrong, but we know what to do, how do we work best, and how do we apply that for us as a team and also for us as individuals. And then it does filter down to our families. I mean, how I manage my husband and my sons, Marita do the same thing. It's really off from this fundamental insight about how are we wired, what does it mean, and how does it work for us. What we want to focus on for today is a little bit more on productivity, remote working, hybrid working, and digital fatigue. We won't go that much detail into digital fatigue, but this is really relevant. People are really, burnout was the first thing that popped up on the screen when we talked about that. People are spending so much time behind these screens, behind their computers. We're finding a huge amount of digital fatigue. And the next free event, just for those of you who find this interesting and want to come back, we're going to talk about relationships, because how we manage our relationships with others is also quite influenced by our thresholds and how we navigate this. So it's basically basic brain body science that we are working with. So when and both Rianda and Galicia have been on our full extensive practitioners course, so we spend a huge amount of time going back to what does the science say? What is happening in the neural pathways in the brain? How much research have we been doing in this field? And there's so much. If you want to go to our website, we've got a whole page on research that has been done. But it is really basic body-brain sciences and how the brain responds to your environment, if we want to go back. So our approach is, and this is quite a fundamental image to explain how we work. That colorful thing at the top there is this wonderful thing called our human brains, and all of us have got a brain. And no, we don't just use 10% of our brains. That's old, outdated information. We do use more of that. And there's also different colors there, because obviously the cortex, the top part of the brain, the cortical areas, consist of various parts. And all of those various parts respond to different sensory input, which I'm not going to go through into detail. I want to bring you back to this little circle at the bottom. The circle at the bottom make a link there in the spinal cord. And then down here is also what we call our genetic barcode, your sensory wiring, your sensory barcode. We've got visual, auditory, seeing and hearing, touch through the skin, smell and taste through the nose and through the mouth. And then movement actually consists of two separate senses. I'll talk about them really soon. But the reality is that we perceive this information comes from our environment, and it actually gets fed into the brain through the spinal cord entry. So it has to enter at the bottom of the brain. There's not an entry level into the cortex, which we know is facilitating of any kind of action. It has to come from the bottom up in order to reach the human brain. There's no entry to the top. So this is what is so fundamental. It really supports a lot of the primitive, unknown, unconscious processing of how the brain gets activated for any type of action. Because the reality of it is none of us operate in a vacuum. We all are bombarded with this information. And there's a particular receptor, there's a pathway, and those pathway processes all enters through the spinal cord before it gets into the cortex for use. So really important to look at it from that point of view. So the 7 senses, just to put you at ease there, for those of you who think, what happened? What is that other 2 that we don't know about? Seeing and hearing, eyes and ears, they are our information senses. And yes, they are the ones that are most used through all of us on a day-to-day basis. This is actions, learning, any kind of processing of information is predominantly through seeing and hearing. And it isn't overloaded 2 systems. If we think about this call, I'm so chuffed that you are all here from across the world. But the reality is you are using your eyes and your ears in order to process this. So just as a quick strategy, which I'm sure all of you are doing on this call, if you're done with this call, then don't go on to the next call straight away. At least stand up, give yourself 5, 10, 15 minutes break just to reset those pathways in your brain so that you don't build up your fatigue towards the end. So really, really important. The next 3 senses, touch, smell, and taste, are grouped as your social senses because they really are a big part of how we connect with other people. Touch is in our skin. We've got touch from the top of our head right down to the soles of our feet. It's also the biggest receptor area of all the senses. And it is basically, where does your body end and where does the world begin? So it's this barrier between us and the world around us. And I'm sure we all know people who's got quite a big body space. Don't get too close to me. That's absolutely directly related to their touch thresholds. Or we've got people who's touchy and huggy and they touch you all the time. They typically have a smaller body space and they can tolerate and they enjoy touch, okay? So, but the touch system is also a social space, but it's also what we put onto our bodies through grooming, dressing, and believe it or not, if you've got a sock on and you feel that seam in your sock the whole day, it is a distraction for you and it is going to deviate from ultimate focus and attention. So the way that we dress, and if we dress according to our sensory needs, we actually alleviate unnecessary irritation, unnecessary distraction, and we've got a better level of focus on a sustainable level. Very, very important. Smell and taste. Smell is obviously everything that goes through the nose. The nose is a bit of it's the preferential sense of the brain. It's a bit of a bugger because smell doesn't get filtered in the thalamus. All of the sensory pathways do have some sort of filter process through the thalamus, which is grand central station in the brain, except for smell. Smell has a direct hotline that goes to the limbic system for emotion and memory. So that's why we know smell usually elicits a strong emotion, and there's often a memory connection with smell. Oh, I'm smelling that. It smells like my grandmother's kitchen. We hear that a lot because of the pathway that we get for smell. The other thing about smell is if there's in particular bad smells in a workplace, it really has a huge impact and an immediate impact and a lingering impact for people who are smell sensitive. So for instance, if we work with any shared office space, please don't open your curry or your fish, heat it up and eat it in the group there. It's just like a no-no. I mean, for us, that's such obvious open shared space etiquette. But the reality is for people who are sensitive, it can actually throw out their focus and their attention span for hours and hours to come. So really, really important. And then taste everything that we put through the mouth. As a group, those senses are deprived because we are looking at isolation. We are looking at our worlds have shrunk. I don't really think taste necessarily. I think those of us working at home, we're too close to the refrigerator now, and we can easily go nibble when we shouldn't be nibbling. So maybe not taste, but I'm referring to our social world here as a whole. And I would be really, really interested to see how our social connections and the quality of our relationships get impacted if we would, I think, research it in a few years to come. What would be the residual impact that COVID would have had on these systems and how it's deprived us from the necessary social connections that we need to make? Anyway, the next 2 senses is the next piece of information that you nearly need to hang on to. Our movement senses consist of 2 of them, and it's also a sensory system. One is the vestibular system. It's in your inner ear, located in your inner ear, it's got 5 little connections that gives us feedback on any head position or any gravity. All right. So whenever we use the head or the gravity input really works through our vestibular system. And it's kind of your body's GPS. It keeps you upright. It helps you that you don't fall out of your chair. It helps you to climb upstairs. And if you're the one that gets car sick or seasick, there's nothing wrong with you. You've got a sensitive vestibular system, which means going on a boat or going on a fast car or going on a roller coaster ride means that system get overstimulated and it triggers autonomic nervous system responses, which will mean you might feel nauseous or you might get anxious. So that's really why that happens. But wonderful, it works together with proprioception. Now, proprioception is there's receptors in every single muscle and joint in your body. And whenever you use your body from a muscle or a joint point of view, your proprioception gets facilitated and it proceeds with a process. We also call proprioception as a universal modulator, meaning if you are tired, you are stressed, you are angry, you are out of kilter, you're not coping, by literally moving your body immediately can have an impact to regulate and calm your brain. That's why I'm saying we have to take regular stretch breaks. And this is another 2 senses that are exceptionally deprived. They are our regulation senses. It does help us to focus, to self-regulate. Think about it. If you feel tired, what's the first thing that you would do? You would get up from your desk. You're not after that coffee or that tea or that glass of water. Your brain is telling you, get up, because it's giving you those automatic signals that your brain needs movement in order to self-regulate. So really, really important. We are very much deprived in these 2 senses because we are so stationary. We don't move around that much. When we were at an office, you could walk to the bathroom or walk to the boardroom or walk to someone else's desk, or you had to walk to your car or to the station or the bus, wherever you actually did your commuting from. Now, because our spaces are so much smaller, we're not moving as much as we used to before, right? So just from that point of view. And if we just look at, we can basically cut the brain in half. This is based on a book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Brilliant book for those of you who are interested in it. We've got the top part of the brain, the bottom part of the brain. The top part of the brain, conscious, controlled, calculated. And with that part of the brain, we reason, we think, we learn, and we perform. I gave some of it away. Bottom part of the brain, unconscious, uncontrolled, intuitive. That's our gut, our habits, our preferences, and our comfort levels. And based also on that research, and if we look at Daniel Kahneman's book, a lot more is happening in the primitive brain than what's happening activity-wise in the executive brain and the thinking brain. So what's happening unconscious, uncontrolled, and intuitive is quite strong and fast because it also is the protection element for the human brain. But very important to remember that there's a lot more going on in this lower part of the brain than we think. And it also facilitates attention, emotion, and behavior. Attention, emotion, and behavior, very, very important. Yes, Tim, you're right, systems 1 and 2. It is exactly what it is. So if we want to go back to where do we fit in from a sensory intelligence point of view? Well, we think IQ is totally overrated and outdated. We do love EQ. I'm so happy that EQ has brought more attention to considering the emotional state of people. We go a level down in the brain. Sensory intelligence is really what is happening in those lower brain structures before even it gets to the limbic system. And there's a lot of processing that happens on a subcortical level. And there's various brain parts that play a role here. And it does influence our stress. It does influence our focus. So really, really important to look at it from that point of view. And sensory is really around your environment because the brain gets influenced through, it enters there at the spinal cord through all the sensory triggers that we receive non-stop throughout the day. 24/7, we do receive, the brain keeps on receiving these messages. And how do we filter? And how do we filter separately? I think sometimes this helps just to contextualize this for you. Typically, psychometrics look at midbrain to executive brain. We go lower down in the brain. Again, we're looking at sensory threshold, sensory processing, which really is around your threshold, which is even in a receptor level outside of the central nervous system, outside of the brain, but then also how does it filter in through the bottom of the brain? How does that filtering process work? And what does it mean for you as an individual? Okay, I think that's sometimes helpful, people. Remember, you are welcome to pop questions in the chat box if you wanted to have any clarity on anything. Okay. It's just my favorite picture. For those of you who know it, I can't find an easier one. If you look at Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, think about those contestants on those seats. It's loud, it's noisy, there's lights. They're sitting on a very uncomfortable chair. They don't have a nice back seat. So what the producers of this show is doing, they're actually putting the contestant in an uncomfortable space. So they are withdrawing energy to not go to the executive brain, but they keep it in that 80% space, because we know we answer those questions with your executive brain. You have to think about it. So it's definitely a strategy, because they don't want to, they don't want to give you that $1 million. Am I right? And people always say, this is so weird. When I'm at home, I know all the answers. I'm sure you've heard that. When I'm at home, I know all the answers. What has changed? The environment. The environment has changed. So again, if we just look at something as simple as Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, if we change the environment, we change the outcome. So environments really, really matter, and they are very important for us to facilitate either good or bad performance for people. And just an example, Mercedes, the car manufacturer, employed 7 engineers to design the sound of that car door closing. The sound of that car door closing, 7 engineers. So retail, and for instance, car manufacturers take sensory stuff very seriously, and they design and they implement accordingly. We also know we buy products because of their sensory appeal. Either it shines, or it smells nice, or it's packed in a way where we can visually find it easier. So the senses are very explicitly used through sensory branding in the retail context. And I always say, if we can be pushed to buy certain products because the marketers in a retail company is using this insight to make certain buying decisions, we are doing exactly the same thing. How do we use this information for us personally to be healthier, to be more focused, to be more in touch, to be more in sync, and to actually produce better quality of work? All right, so that's just a little bit of an introduction. Okay, so sensory assessments, this is a way for us to measure. Okay, so how does your brain respond to the environment? Are you more sensitive? Are you more seeking? Do you prefer touch, or do you prefer movement? So going through this process, we can really drill down to what works for you as a person and what doesn't work for you as a person, and how did we then align environments accordingly. All right. So the 2 extremes here, you either are on the sensitive extreme or you are on the seeking extreme. The more sensitive you are, the more lower your thresholds are. The more seeking you are, the more higher your thresholds are. Okay, think a bit like pain threshold. Low pain threshold, feel pain very quickly, very sensitive to pain, don't want to be stuck with needles. High pain threshold, ooh, I'm not even feeling, I'm getting pricked, or I'm bleeding, I don't even know that I've scratched myself. Sensory threshold works exactly the same way. The only thing is, we measure your threshold across all of your 7 systems to determine should you work in a quiet space, but it should be with more people. Based on that, we can draw very valuable, very correct, and very scientific conclusions of what type of activity, what type of environment suits you best, okay, which is really important. So thank you, Alison. I know she's off the call. She shared the sensory quiz with you. It's a freebie on our website. Go through and play around with it to determine, have you got low, medium, or high thresholds, obviously. And then just running you through our other tests. The sensory matrix is a test that I've designed many moons ago. This is our wellness test. It's quite comprehensive. Sensors on Call was actually the first product that I designed in 2008 after I completed my PhD in the call center space to determine whether a particular agent should work in that shared space or not. And then we are in beta phase launching Sensors at Work, which is really using sensory processing to determine, should you go back to the office? Should you work more from home? Or what kind of hybrid approach should we follow for you? So just from that point of view. All right, and then obviously we use our sensory tree. The sensory tree is a lovely analogy, and it's quite easy because I think often when we speak to lay people or we relay information to other people, how can we make it simple? How can we make it digestible? How can we make it easier for people? And the sensory tree does exactly that. So we measure your thresholds, and then are you a leaf? Are you a trunk, or are you a root? And it becomes really nice, non-threatening, easy conversation and terminology to play around with. So in this room, Marita is a root and I'm a leaf, okay? And for instance, we work together very differently. We also understand each other really, really well. And all of us are on this continuum somewhere. Some of us are quite outlying, or some of us can be in the middle. Bethany, you're a trunk, absolutely. So obviously the sensory seekers, the high thresholds, it's like, think about the leaves. They in the grass, they're up in the trees, there's the sun, the birds, the wind, the butterflies, they throw off their leaves, they turn red, they are green, so there's a lot of change in the leaves. So those are high thresholds. If you've done the quiz, those are those high A scores. Sensory neutrals are in between. Those of you who's done the quiz, obviously, the quiz gives you just a quick overview. If you would do our other assessments, it gives you a better breakdown. But this is a nice way just to get introduction to it. And then obviously the roots are deep down in the ground, cool, calm, and quiet. There's not much going on. There might be the odd earthworm, but they actually want to be deep down in the ground. And those are our sensory avoiders, our low threshold group. Those of you with high B scores. What I thought to do, I'm going to share some of the stats with you. Now, I was contemplating, should I share this with you or not? And then I thought I am going to. Obviously, because we've been running so much data through our platform, pre-COVID, 25% of people were more sensory avoiders, more low threshold. 39% of people were more neutral, and we had 36% of people as leaves, okay? And I know that 25% was really confirmed through various other research portals. But what's really, really interesting, about 3 months ago, we did another tally up of all the data that we have on our background in the back end of our system. And it's looking very different. And I was looking at it and I'm like, what is going on? There seems to be a shift towards more sensitive people. The sensory neutrals has stayed a little bit the same, but post-COVID, so there's a drop, there's less seekers and more avoiders, okay? Now, I don't want to get stuck on that. There might be a reason because our data, might have been more sampling towards one particular group, but there is a story for me in this. Because our world has shrunk so much and we're not getting the same amount of social exposure that we have done before, has it actually made people more sensitive from that point of view? So that's a really, really question that I'm asking. And therefore I thought, I know a lot of you are quite inquisitive about information and data, and I thought for that reason I wanted to share it with you as a group. Marita?
I think it might be worth our while just to share a bit more about the typical difference in groups, because there was a question from Anna where these stats are neurotypical or both neurotypical and neurodivergent.
Okay, so what I will do, Anna, thanks for that. Obviously, our pool, we have a lot of licensed users, and these licensed users do work in the mental health field. So yes, there might be a little bit of a layering towards a bigger group of people working in the mental health field. So we did tally that up. We actually did do a tally up, and we separated our licensed practitioners with the neurotypical group. And it did elevate a little bit, but it wasn't that much of a change. Okay. So I do think it's important to consider that. So it did shift a little bit, but there was still a bit of an increase to people finding that they are more avoiding. This is still new research, and we possibly would look at, exploring that in more depth and maybe writing that up. And then I certainly, will share that with you. But I think it's also an important question to ask. The other thing that we also know, there are more people with mental health issues, anxiety, and burnout. So there is an increase that we've also been seeing. So it could be our sample, So there's two reasons. It could be our sample was more moved or geared towards people with mental health backgrounds or mental health potential issues or risks. But then the other question is, have we as a population, or have we globally shifted a little bit? So that's an important question. And I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I thought it would be an interesting question to put out there.
Annemarie, just before we move away from that, also Galicia asked, interesting, could it also be possibly due to huge exposure to negativity bias in social media through COVID?
I guess yes. Look, I think as soon as we look at stats, and I think that's what you learn if you do research. When I finished my PhD, I've never felt as stupid ever in my life when I finished my PhD, because I think if you start to look at data and research, there are so many variables that can play a role. So I do think it's really important to consider all the variables and all the elements, and no research is perfect and no data is perfect, and we can never account for all the variables. But Galicia, I think you're right. I think social media, is really a stickler when it comes to shifting people. And we do know that teenagers and teenage suicide, we're going a little bit off topic here, has also been impacted by social media, and we know it has an impact. So could the post-COVID be due to the escalation of mental health and anxiety? C.A. Thomas, definitely yes. That's been clearly documented. I just finished writing a research article. There's a 25% increase in depression and anxiety globally post-COVID. Significant increase. So playing a little bit with the data here, but there's various reasons to it. All right. So those of you, who are the leaves here in the group, so that we can run through what does that mean for you? All the sensory leaves, the people with high threshold, you had high A's on your sensory quiz. So hopefully those of you, let's run through that. What does it mean for you as a person? If you've got high threshold, you are a high sensory seeker. You prefer busy, engaging in exciting type of environments, active environments. You can get distractible because you can get bored easily. You love and embrace change. You typically are high risk takers. These are the people that would run that red light, the red traffic light, or, get a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, or no, I'll just park here because I'm not, even though I'm not supposed to. They have a tendency to avoid or dislike detailed structure and rules. This group get cabin fever, and they can get bored in a home working space, and they do suffer a little bit from FOMO, fear of missing out. So this particular group, from a hybrid working, should work more at the office than at home. Now, don't get me wrong. Home working has got huge flexibility elements and huge flexibility benefits. There's a whole myriad of benefits for home working. But this particular person, and I'm absolutely an example of that. I've got high thresholds, and I'm working from home constantly now. We've always worked from home, but we always went out to see clients. Now we service clients online. And I promise you, this has been the hardest adjustment for me. So I know from personal experience, and we've seen that through all of our samples so far, people with high threshold, we should get them back to the office as quickly and as possible. We want the flexibility, also let them be able to work from home, but they are definitely your office animals and should go back to the office. They're also just high risk for substance abuse, aggression, and reckless behaviors. I always bring that in just so that you know, proven by research. But definitely in this type of group, we want them to go back to the office more because they need that stimulation. They actually need to go through that. Who are our roots here? Those of you who've done the sensory quiz and had high B's, Rihanna's a root. I know Marita's a root. So maybe some of you, the others that you've done the sensory quiz for, what does it mean for you? What does it mean to be a root of our sensory tree and to have low thresholds? You are typically sensory avoiders. You prefer contained, quiet, and structured, calm environments. You also get distractible because you get overstimulated quickly. The leaves, the high threshold people, get distracted because they get bored. The roots get distracted because of overstimulation, where there's too much information. They would avoid and resist change, and they don't take risks that easily. They like detail, structure, and rules. They enjoy their own space. This group is very happy to miss out. JOMO stands for joy of missing out. they're very happy to miss out because they like to be in their own spaces. They do best in a contained, quiet, and calm environment. They are perfectly suited for home working. So from a hybrid point of view, this group, you want to get more at home and less in the office. I think all of us need, if you've got an office set up, we do need to go back to the office from a social connection and a communication point of view. But for this group, I would say 80% home, 20% office, just, to give you that. But then also this group is our higher risk for mental health issues, for depression and anxiety. That's also very clearly showed in the research that we've done so far. Then let's look at the medium threshold. Thank heavens for the medium threshold. They are the trunk, and make sure that the tree doesn't fall over, because the roots can't function on their own, and the leaves also need the roots to keep them stable, but they keep the balance between the two. Those are sensory neutrals. Their brain responds equally to sensory input. Focus and attention is appropriate. They would change. Is fairly measured and calculated. They are often quite adaptable and flexible. And this group are often really, really good mediators. They know how to see two sides of a different story, and they mediate quite naturally and quite intuitively. They're very flexible with space. They would be the last people that has got a very strong need for space. So, and a bit of FOMO and JOMO, so they juggle between the two. And from a hybrid working point of view, this is the person that you usually can put anywhere, and they'll possibly manage or function in any kind of hybrid set out in most cases. So they find that very successful. Some negativity about this type of profile, they might not be very expressive about their own needs, and they often put themselves last. And then, boring. And I always get trouble for saying this group of guys are boring. You're not boring, but I mean, the roots had got anxiety, depression, the leaves had substance abuse. So you guys have to deal with some sort of negativity. Boring just means, you can be perceived as sitting on the fence. So it's just playing around. Yeah, I know, Bethany, you are not boring. Okay. I know you are not. It's just bringing that in to give a little bit of we are grouping here, we are boxing, but it helps just to understand what is happening in your nervous system, in your brain, and how does it play out into your day-to-day function. All right. So then I want to tap into, I don't know if there's any questions here, because I want to go into sensory ergonomics a little bit, just to give you more practical advice and information here. I don't know if there was anything, Marita, was there important questions before I go on?
Okay. There was a question, from Raisa. How do we assist healthcare workers in this environment who are sensory roots? In my experience, it definitely affects productivity.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. Look, I think that's where leadership flexibility comes in. There's so much small adaptations that we can make to, for instance, help a root function optimally in a healthcare space. But then is there context for change? In other words, is leadership prepared to say, okay, you can work in a smaller ward, or you don't need to work in 5 different centers. You only need to work in one center. So if you can make changes to that person's schedule so that they work in quieter spaces, or they work night shift, this is just something that popped into my mind. If you work night shifts, it's usually quieter. If I think healthcare works, if I think about a nurse, if a nurse who's a root work night shift, it will most likely be a better option for her to stay in that, because there will be less movement or less going on. And then you would also look at, for instance, I know these things just pop in my mind. Someone who's smell sensitive shouldn't be working in a burns unit. I'm just giving you these examples. So wherever you are and wherever you work, we can look at the environment, the structure, the type of activities that you do. What times are you working in order to adapt to make your brain manage it easier? The reality is, if there's a misfit, in other words, if we are exposed to overload as a root consistently, continuously, or if we are exposed to boredom as a leaf consistently, something's got to break. It is going to break somewhere. And the breaking often goes down into burnout, mental health issues. So we definitely want to prevent that from happening. So helping people firstly to understand themselves, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, why do they get overloaded, what are the triggers, the environmental triggers that create that overload, and then how can we adapt accordingly. Okay, and the next few slides that I want to run with you is making it, this is where we drill down, hugely practical, hugely practical. And I'm sharing just a little bit of the tip of the iceberg here, but I will take you through it, because yes, we are bombarded, we are in information overload consistently. Okay, and if your office looks like that, yes, Marita?
No, sorry, there's a very interesting comment from Nadia saying, I had an interesting reading, a science site, not academic, that teen brains aged 3 years during COVID. They aren't sure where their brains will go with this. Read, just catch up. I also wonder what happens to adult brains, especially if sensory preferences are out of sync with job needs.
Absolutely. Such a great question. I think, Nadia, I don't even want to know. That's why I made the comment. It would be interesting to see how our brains and worlds has changed. That's why I threw those stats up for you there to show what is it telling us. I know we need to read between all the data lines, but what is it telling us? But if you are out of sync, if your sensory preferences, which is very fundamental, it's a primitive need, it sits at the bottom of Maslow, but we don't know about it. It sits really at the bottom of Maslow. If our sensory needs are not being met, ultimately, there will be some sort of a breakdown. And I believe it's really not sustainable to be out of sync with your workspace or your job type. So I always, when people join our big course, I always say a bit of a disclaimer. You will learn a lot about yourselves. And we have had people who's done our course and then drastically changed their career or the way that they work, but obviously for the better. Because if we work in a space that works for us, fundamentally for your brain and your needs and your sensory needs, we can work sustainably for longer periods of time. Okay. But just taking the focus back here on your workspace, if your workspace look like this, it's not conducive. Okay. There's too much clutter and it's totally disorganizing. But if your workspace look like this, and obviously there's a lot of greenery in here because we know there's so much research around what green spaces are doing for productivity and mental health. But the more, and it's not about being beautiful, it's about being conducive. Okay, this is beautiful and it absolutely appeals to me. But the more clean, organized, structured, open you can make your environment, which suits your needs. And obviously, if you bring the green spaces into it, it can hugely impact your performance and your productivity. So just playing around, environments matter. They matter hugely. And it's always a little bit of a debate. We don't go so much into the somatic systems, into what goes on inside the body. I'm not saying they're not important, they certainly are, but if we can focus on what's externally outside of the body from an environment point of view, it allows us quite a lot of practical changes that we can make. Hence the next few slides. What are sensory ergonomics? Sensory ergonomics is small, easy, simple, effective, cheap changes that you can make to your environment to help you to work calmer, more focused, better, more energy, use your time, based on your personal thresholds. Because again, one environment would be conducive for one person, but that same environment would be totally distracting for someone else. One size fits all does not work from this point of view. So visual is seeing, what are you hearing? What are you feeling? Smell and taste is food and odors, and muscle movement is muscle and joints. And then multisensory is bringing it all together, energy and activity. So I just want to run you through. Okay, so visual, declutter. Start just with decluttering, because too much clutter is going to put your brain in visual overload. If you've got low threshold for the visual system, yes, you have to declutter immediately. But even if you have high threshold for the visual system, declutter to an extent so that you can rest your brain. Because our brains take in all the information all the time. So if we declutter, we help the brain to be more focused. And then obviously just lighting. The type of lighting that you use is really important. Natural lighting, always better than fluorescent lighting. Auditory. I mean, we are bombarded with sounds and noise. Notifications, ringtones on these horrible things that we all are addicted to. I mean, what's your ringtone on your cell phone? Choose a ringtone that appeals to you, that is nice, that's not shrilling and loud and hard, okay? Particularly if you have got low thresholds for the auditory system. And then switch off your noise notifications if you are more auditory sensitive. Use vibration or just check your phone from time to time. Notifications is my one big pet peeve. I think I get crazy when I hear people's notifications, and it is so easy to change. Technology is there also to make our lives easier. So make sure you manage your technology. Don't let technology manage you, obviously. Smell and taste. I had to put that picture at the top there just, for heaven's sake, if we share space with other people, be mindful that your lunch could be totally overstimulating for someone else. So be very mindful when you bring smell in any shared spaces. Don't do it. Don't bring any smell into a shared space, because you won't know for whom it could be hugely overloading and distracting. And then just at the bottom, you know, smell is such a amazing sense, and sense that we can do so much with it. But personal. Choose the smells that works for you. Use it, and use it in your own environment. Okay, but make sure you use it when to obviously calm, but we also can use it to alert the brain. If we go through touch, and I gave you 2 images here. Now that's a chair. So literally the chair that we sit on obviously gives us touch feedback. And here at the bottom, I love these concepts where we've got chill areas or chill spaces. That really means you contain your space. So in other words, it puts you in a bit of a cocoon. So it protects you from a touch system. But we literally choose our seats in a shared space, both based on our touch threshold. People with sensitivity for touch should be sitting in corners with their back against the wall, and should have spaces like this at the bottom to go into. For instance, when I worked in call centers, I did a lot of work in how to design chill areas in a call center, because these are the type of spaces that you need if you work in a busy, stressful, highly overloaded type of an environment. So touch is really around seating. Where do we sit? Movement, stretch at your desk, stand up, take breaks. And then the picture at the top is a standing desk. The invention for COVID, most amazing thing ever. I've got one as well. Marita have one. That was the first thing that we invested in shortly after COVID, because standing and working just helps you to rebalance and using your self-regulation systems through vestibular and proprioception. And then just multi-sensory means look at your space as a whole. What can you do in all of your spaces to contain it, to control it, to make it conducive? But then the other thing is also around scheduling. You need to manage your schedule. You need to manage your boundaries so that you don't get into overload. Very, very important. So hopefully that from a sensory ergonomics point of view is giving you some really simple, easy tips and tools where you can remove distractions and actually sustain your energy, your focus, manage your time better, and obviously be productive. This is different for every single person based on your particular needs, but just, you know, as a general introduction. Okay, I see we have 2 more minutes. I just want to wrap up. If you need any more information, we are beta launching our new hybrid working tool. For those of you who would want to know more, please touch base with us. You can read my book. It is available on Amazon. And then obviously those of you, which is particularly why we've put out this invitation to you as a group, if those of you find that you want to increase your professional development, you want to add some skills to your toolbox, then do sign up for our practitioners course. I know Rianda and Kalithia, they all have been on the course, and thank you for being here as well. So do feel free to sign up for it. It starts in April. It is over 6 weeks. It's quite a comprehensive course. We do it all online, but there's a lot of Zoom and breakout sessions, and we really do a huge deep dive into the theory, the science, the assessments. We do case studies. It's quite an extensive learning opportunity. So we really want to invite you if you want to be interested to join. And then I don't know if there's any final questions, Marita?
No, there weren't any specific. Just one comment from CA Thomas, like the easy and simple tips you gave. I agree that it's different per person, but important that people try out the different ones and see what works for them and adjust accordingly. Okay. Bethany saying thank you. And yeah, I'm checking if there's any questions. No particular questions. Oh, there's one question. If in service center and low sensory, what would you suggest?
Yeah, Thomas, if it's a call center, just please get them out of there. This is the quick answer. Just get them out of there. If individuals can't leave their role, I know. For instance, I'm going to use a call center as an example. We did that. Then I would suggest look at can they reallocate that person to another role. Then they shouldn't be front office calling type of positions. Then they often is better for them to work in QA, data capturing, or web chat, where there's not calls coming into them, that they've got control over the calls that they send out. So even outbound as opposed to inbound, because inbound, there's a lot of uncertainty and calls get pushed to you. Outbounds mean I can pick up the phone and call someone else. We found that with my research sample, I know it's over time, but it's such a good question, that the lower threshold group actually took more time between their calls. And it makes perfect sense, because if I've done a call, let me just spend 2 or 3 minutes just to recalibrate and get my grip and write my stuff down before I start the next call. So, if people can't change their job, we can change the role, we can change their seat, we can give them a 2-ear headset instead of a 1-ear headset, put them in the corner, give them a screen or a different provider. There's many ways that we can do that. And then there was another comment, you don't need to trial and error these suggestions. That's why we've designed our full comprehensive test. If you want to know exactly what to do for you, then you can always do our full assessment, because that's already then chosen for you. So you don't need to go through trial and error. And I think that's what I've learned so much from people over the years. I didn't need to learn this through trial and error. Oh, I wish I knew this about myself earlier, because I would have prevented so many mistakes that I was making. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to keep you long. It's 1 minute over the time. Is the full assessment similar to the assessment in your book? It's updated, Bethany. It is based on that assessment, but that's the updated version, because I've done more research on it. And then obviously, if you do the full assessment, you get a 26-page report off from the Sensory Matrix. Sensors at Work is a shorter version. There's only 10 pages on the report, and it's very workplace specific. But yeah, you can get a lot more information from there. And guys, this is just, I think, a nice quote. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. Again, environments matter. And if you understand yourself and you can adapt your environment, small tweaks, so that it fits within your need and what your brain really needs, you are going to make life easier, faster, simpler, and better for yourself. Okay. Guys, thank you for your time. Thank you for being on the call with us. Really, really appreciate it. We will be sharing the recording. So those of you who want to listen to it again, you're very welcome to do that. And yes, Oliver, lovely to see you on the call as well. And for all of the familiar and the new faces, thank you guys. Take care, be good, and feel free to touch base with us afterwards. Okay, great. Cheers.